The athlete who runs the fastest does not win the 800 meters. The athlete who can make it through the last 200 meters wins. And that's precisely where this conflict gets interesting. Keely Hodgkinson, an Olympic champion with unmatched control over the 800, is positioned on one side. Femke Bol, on the other hand, is a formidable force whose quickness and capacity for composure in the face of extreme exhaustion have the potential to alter everything. But who actually has the advantage when the legs start to scream at 600 meters? Is it unadulterated speed, distribution of races, or the capacity to go faster than everyone else? This fight has a secret weapon, and by the last 200 meters, we might find out who really controls the 800's future. For that reason alone, this matchup merits a closer examination. Keely Hodgkinson contributes a level of expertise to the discussion that Bol cannot produce in a single day due to her years of experience in the 800-meter race. Hodgkinson is aware of the two-lap rhythm, positioning, tactical challenges, and, above all, when an 800-meter race begins to feel more like a struggle against fatigue than a controlled competition. She's not just fast. The secret is to know when to spend it. Keely is without a doubt the greatest as a result of that experience. However, Femke Bol poses an entirely different threat. She learned how to function when the body is already under a great deal of stress from her experience in the 400-meter and 400-meter hurdles. She understands what it's like to go into the last straight with heavy legs, growing exhaustion, and little margin for error. When other runners start to lose their form, she has the advantage of being able to maintain technical composure, and that raises an intriguing issue. Keely is more familiar with 800 meters. Femke might be fast enough to make the last stages hazardous. The distance is mastered by one athlete. The other has spent years perfecting the art of quickly overcoming exhaustion. So which skill is more important? The quicker athlete should, in theory, prevail. However, that is not how the 800 meters operate. Even with an amazing 400-meter speed, a runner may find it difficult to complete 2 laps. If you run the first lap too hard, you may end up with a debt that needs to be paid. When the race reaches 600 meters, the seemingly unstoppable athlete may discover that their legs are no longer responding to their brain. The first 400 meters may therefore be deceptive. It's not always the case that the athlete ahead is winning. It's not always the case that the athlete behind is losing. The actual conflict might be taking place within the body. The cost increases with each step. It takes more energy for each acceleration. It gets more difficult to recover from each positioning error. Additionally, as the runners approach the last bend, fatigue, strategy, and the capacity to maintain mechanics under duress start to clash with raw talent. Femke's past becomes fascinating at this point. She could present Hodgkinson with an entirely different kind of challenge if she can maintain her 400-meter speed in the 800 without incurring excessive costs during the first lap. However, Keely's experience could become crucial if she spends too much too soon. Keely also has another advantage. When things start to hurt, she knows how to race this distance. She is aware that winning an 800-meter race requires more than just finishing the first 400 meters. It is won by reaching the final 200 with sufficient strength, speed, and control to persevere when your body begs you to give up. This leads us to the question that no one can answer by focusing only on their own best. When both athletes cross the 600 meters together, what happens? When there are just 200 meters remaining, the crowd becomes louder. The stride tightens and there is nowhere to hide. What happens? Because the last 200 meters may reveal something that cannot be shown by numbers alone. It might show whether Femke can overcome Keely's experience or whether Femke's exceptional speed and resistance to fatigue have produced a new weapon for the 800 meters. Furthermore, the question of who is faster is no longer relevant if they are side by side with 200 meters remaining. Who slows down the least? It gets much more brutal. And now we reach the part of the race where everything changes. The opening 200 meters is not necessarily about winning. It is about controlling the cost of the race. Keely Hodgkinson has the experience to understand this instinctively. She does not need to panic if another runner moves ahead early. Her objective is to stay composed, protect her rhythm, and keep enough energy in reserve for the stages that actually decide the race. Femke Bol presents a different problem. Her natural speed gives her the ability to establish position quickly. But the question is whether using that speed early would help her or trap her. In an 800-meter race, being first at 200 meters can look spectacular while secretly becoming expensive. Then comes the second 200. This is where the race begins to reveal its true shape. The athletes are no longer simply running fast, they are managing fatigue. Every decision matters. Push too hard, and the final 200 becomes a survival test. Hold back too much, and the leader may disappear. At 400 meters, the race can still look under control. But the real test is waiting. Between 400 and 600 meters, the body begins collecting the price of every decision made earlier. The breathing becomes heavier. The stride can begin to tighten. Maintaining posture requires more concentration. The athlete who looked effortless at the start now has to fight to preserve the same mechanics. And this is where the matchup becomes fascinating. Keely's advantage is experience at exactly this distance. She understands how to enter the final bend without spending everything too soon. Femke's potential advantage is the ability to bring exceptional speed into a race that is already becoming physically brutal, but there is one question that matters more than almost everything else: who is slowing down less, because the 800 meters is ultimately a battle against deceleration. At 600 meters, neither athlete can hide anymore. The final 200 is where speed meets fatigue and technique meets pain. A runner can still have the fastest legs on the track and yet lose the race if those legs can no longer produce the same rhythm. This is what makes Femke's past so fascinating. She has raced the 400 and 400-meter hurdles for years, which has made it difficult for her to stay composed when she is already extremely exhausted. She doesn't have to be significantly faster than Keely if that ability transfers to 800 meters. All she has to do is stay faster for longer. And that's the key. It's not who has more speed. Who can preserve more of that speed when the race becomes painful is the question. Keely's experience is specific to distance. Femke has a track record of maintaining mechanics under extreme fatigue and a foundation of speed. One is based on solving the 800-meter puzzle. The other might offer an entirely different approach to the problem. So picture the last 200 meters. Keely is struggling to keep her beat intact. Femke is attempting to use her speed as a final weapon. Neither athlete feels at ease anymore. The crowd is growing. The gap is closing or widening. Every step turns into a choice. Suddenly, the question of who looks stronger at 200 meters is no longer relevant. At 700, it's about who has enough left, who can stay in shape at 750, and when the body is screaming to stop, who can generate one last acceleration. This matchup is more than just a comparison because of that. Femke might become an entirely different kind of threat in the 800 meters if she can combine her speed with the endurance and race distribution needed for 2 laps. And Keely might continue to be the standard that everyone else must meet if she keeps honing the very traits that have already made her an elite 800-meter runner. One cruel formula: speed times endurance times control minus deceleration may ultimately determine the outcome of this matchup, and that final score in the 800 meters can make the difference between a champion and a great runner. The most important lesson from this matchup, after all we've seen, is straightforward. The 800 meters isn't about who gets to the 400 meters first. When the race begins to hurt, it is about who has something left. Keely Hodgkinson is very hard to defeat because of this. She has spent years learning how to control those 2 laps, how to maintain composure when the race gets chaotic, and how to convert experience into speed when the finish line is finally in sight. She doesn't have to win the entire race. She must be prepared for the most important moment. Femke Bol, however, stands for something distinct and possibly hazardous. The ceiling could be very high if she can maintain the speed, discipline, and fatigue resistance that made her stand out in the 400 meters and 400-meter hurdles, while also improving her 800-meter endurance. Bol's speed is no longer the most important question. She obviously does. Whether she can maintain that speed well into the second lap without incurring excessive early costs is the question. Because if she can, the last 200 meters turn into an entirely different battle. Imagine the 2 women walking together into the last bend. Keely is experienced, Femke is faster. Both are worn out. Both are aware that the difference can only be made in a few seconds. There's nowhere to hide. No personal best can run the final 200 for you. No reputation can protect you from fatigue, and no tactical plan matters if your legs stop responding. The athlete who wins that moment will be the athlete who can preserve the most speed when the body demands the opposite. And that is why this matchup could become so fascinating for the future of the 800 meters. Maybe Keely remains the standard. Maybe Femke develops into the challenger nobody expected. Or maybe the rivalry pushes both women to levels neither could reach alone. So now I want to hear your prediction. If Keely Hodgkinson and Femke Bol were side by side with 200 meters to go, who are you betting on? Would you trust Keely's experience and mastery of the 800? Or would you bet on Femke's speed, strength, and ability to stay composed when the race becomes brutal? There's only one way to settle the argument. Comment your pick below and tell us who you think wins the final 200 meters.